In 212 BC, a single edict from the most powerful man on earth condemned hundreds to death and thousands of years of knowledge to ash. This is Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. In the West, we know the Terracotta warriors, we know the Great Wall, and we know the word tyrant. But here is what you were never told. This man did not just build an empire, he invented the very concept of China, and to do it, he committed what some call the greatest act of cultural vandalism in history, the burning of books and the burying of scholars. But what if I told you almost everything you know about this event is wrong? That the man who tried to erase the past actually created the future? This is not a story of good versus evil. This is the story of the most dangerous gamble in ancient history and the price of creating a nation. To understand why a civilization would embrace a monster, you must first understand the nightmare he ended. Imagine Europe during the 30 Years' War, but lasting for 2 centuries. This was China's warring states period. 7 kingdoms, endless slaughter, and a philosophy that justified total war, legalism. In the West, we often credit Rome for unifying the Mediterranean through law. But in China, legalism was darker. It believed that humans were inherently selfish, that mercy was weakness, and that the state must be a machine of absolute efficiency. It was one man, the merchant-turned-minister Shang Yang, who turned the state of Qin into a totalitarian war machine 2 centuries before the first emperor was even born. He created a society where your value was measured only by 2 things: grain production and enemy heads. Yes, literally. Bring a severed head, get a promotion. By the time Ying Zheng ascended the throne of Qin at age 13, he inherited not just a kingdom, but a doomsday weapon designed to swallow the world. What Ying Zheng did in just 10 years, from 230 to 221 BC, remains one of the most astonishing military achievements in human history. He conquered 6 rival states, each with distinct cultures, currencies, and writing systems. But here is where he diverged from Alexander or Caesar. Alexander conquered and left. Caesar conquered and exploited. But the first emperor, he conquered and standardized. With terrifying efficiency, he erased diversity. Axles of carts were forced to be the same width so roads could be universal. Weights and measures were unified. Most importantly, the writing system was brutally centralized into a single script, small seal script. Think about this. Today, a Mandarin speaker from Beijing and a Cantonese speaker from Hong Kong cannot understand each other's speech, but they can read the same newspaper. That political miracle began here, with this man's obsession with control. He didn't just want to rule subjects. He wanted to rewrite reality itself. And that is where the terror begins. In 213 BC, at a banquet in the imperial palace, a scholar named Chunyue committed career suicide. He suggested that the emperor should learn from the past, specifically the ancient Zhou dynasty, and grant lands to his sons, creating a feudal system like medieval Europe. The emperor didn't answer. He simply looked at his chancellor, Li Si. Li Si, a man who had climbed from rat-infested poverty to the peak of power through pure mercilessness, delivered the killing blow. The past, he declared, is a weapon against the present. The edict that followed is known as the burning of books. But here is the crucial detail history books often omit. It was specific, very specific. Private possession versus official preservation burned private copies of the classic of poetry, the Book of Documents, the 100 Schools of Thought philosophy, and historical records of the defeated states and preserved books on medicine, divination, and agriculture. The imperial archives remained intact. The classics were not erased from existence. They were erased from private existence. The state was conducting a monopoly on truth. It wasn't genocide of ideas. It was a hostile takeover of history. But the emperor's paranoia was just beginning. 2 years later, in 211 BC, the emperor discovered that the magicians he had funded to find the elixir of immortality were actually mocking him behind his back. His response was thermonuclear. He ordered an investigation of all scholars in the capital, particularly the Fangxi, the sorcerer scientists. 460 of them were found guilty of subverting the state. They were not burned, they were buried alive. Historical records suggest many were actually political opponents disguised as magicians. But the message was clear: the emperor owned the future, and the past, and your life. The first emperor died in 210 BC, terrified of death, surrounded by mercury pills that were slowly poisoning him. A cruel irony for a man seeking eternal life. His dynasty collapsed within 3 years. The Qin was so hated that the very name China does not actually come from Qin. It came from later dynasties. So why does he matter? Because what survived the flames was the system. The Han dynasty, which followed, claimed to reject Qin's cruelty while quietly keeping every single one of its innovations. The centralized bureaucracy, the meritocratic exams, the unified script. In the West, we admire Rome for its laws, but Rome fell and never returned. China, however, always falls and always returns to unity, that cultural DNA. The belief that division is temporary and unity is destiny was coded by this tyrant. He was not a good man. He was probably not even a sane man, but he solved the problem that destroyed Alexander's empire and plagued medieval Europe. How do you govern diversity without fragmentation? His answer was terrifying. You sacrifice freedom for permanence. Today, as we watch modern nations struggle with fragmentation, misinformation, and the battle over who controls historical truth, the first emperor feels uncomfortably contemporary. He reminds us that authoritarian efficiency can achieve what democracy cannot, but at a cost measured in silenced voices and buried scholars. The Terracotta warriors, his eternal guardians, still stand guard not just over a tomb, but over a fundamental question. Is unity worth any price? History does not give us the answer. It only gives us the man who chose and the 2,000 years that followed. If you want to see how the empire he built fought against the greatest nomadic threat in history, check out our video on the Battle of Changping. And remember, history is written by the victors unless someone burns the books first.